a tear. The charts look explosive. The narratives are compelling. Every thumbnail on YouTube has silver bars and rocket emojis. But while everyone's been staring at silver, something else has been happening. Quietly, systematically, in the pipes and plumbing of the global economy. And almost nobody is paying attention. There's another metal. One that sits inside everything you use, everything you drive, everything that keeps your lights on. One that powers the electrical grid, the EV revolution, the AI data centers, the renewable energy build-out. And it's running out. Not in the theoretical supply might get tight someday way. In the we have less than 72 hours of buffer way. I'm talking about copper. And by the end of this, you're going to understand why the smart money is quietly panicking, while the mainstream media is still calling this a speculative rotation. Let me show you what I'm seeing. As of this week, LME copper is sitting at $12,537 per metric ton. That's up 42% from where we were this time last year. COMEX copper is at $5.91 per pound, staring directly at the $6 psychological barrier that everyone in this space is watching. But the price isn't the story. The story is the inventory. LME copper stocks are at 145,325 tons. In the last 48 hours alone, 2,100 tons disappeared. Just gone. Let me put that number in perspective. At current global consumption rates, 145,000 tons represents less than 3 days of supply. 3 days. That's not a strategic reserve. That's not a buffer. That's a rounding error. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. I've been watching the paper markets show these clean, orderly prices. Everything looks normal on the screen. The charts are behaving. The futures are trading. Meanwhile, I'm getting reports from physical dealers who are moving to pre-order only models because they can't source material. Fabricators who are being told lead times have doubled. Industrial buyers who are quietly paying premiums that don't show up on any ticker. The screen says everything is fine. The physical market is saying something very different. And that's where the real pressure starts. Now, most people hear copper shortage and they think, okay, prices go up, supply eventually catches up. Market finds equilibrium. Normal commodity cycle stuff. But this isn't a normal cycle. Something broke. And I need to explain the mechanism because this is the part that most people don't understand. And it's the core of why this shortage is so severe. It's called negative treatment charges. Let me break this down in plain English because it matters. Here's how the copper supply chain normally works. A mining company digs copper ore out of the ground. That ore isn't refined copper. It's concentrate. It's basically dirt with copper in it. The miner then pays a smelter to turn that concentrate into refined metal. The usable stuff, the stuff that actually goes into wires and pipes and circuit boards. That fee the miner pays to the smelter? That's called the treatment charge. Simple transaction. Miner has ore. Smelter has refining capacity. Miner pays smelter for the service. But right now, treatment charges have gone negative. That means the smelter is paying the miner for the privilege of refining their ore. Let that sink in for a second. The smelter is losing money on every single ton of copper they produce. Why would anyone do that? Because smelters are trapped. These are massive industrial operations, enormous furnaces, billions of dollars in infrastructure. You can't just turn a copper smelter off like a light switch. If you shut down the furnaces and let the equipment go cold, you risk destroying millions of dollars in machinery. Restarting a cold smelter can take months and cost a fortune, if it's even possible. So smelters have a choice: keep running and lose money on every ton, or shut down and potentially lose everything. They're choosing to bleed slowly rather than die quickly. But here's the thing. They need concentrate to keep the machines running, and there's not enough concentrate available. The shortage isn't at the refining level, it's upstream, at the mines. Think of it like this. Imagine you own a juice bar. You have a $50,000 industrial juicer that you absolutely cannot let sit idle, or it seizes up and dies. But there's an orange shortage. You're so desperate to keep that juicer running that you start paying to people to bring you oranges. Even though you're losing money on every glass of juice you sell, you're not doing it to make a profit. You're doing it to avoid the catastrophic cost of your equipment failing. That's what's happening to copper smelters right now. They are cannibalizing their own capital just to stay operational. And here's the terrifying part. When they finally give up and shut down, the supply of refined metal doesn't just dip, it stops. The smelters are bleeding out in silence. And when the first major smelter closes its doors, that 3-day inventory buffer we talked about earlier is going to feel like a luxury. But that's not the part that matters yet. The part that matters is understanding where this shortage came from. Freeport-McMoRan's Grasberg mine, one of the largest copper mines on the planet. It had a major disaster. And that disaster has officially removed 313,000 metric tons from the 2026 supply forecast. Just gone. Wiped off the books. Now, J.P. Morgan and Goldman Sachs are both projecting a global deficit between 330,000 and 600,000 metric tons for this year. But here's where the math gets really ugly. There are unverified reports, and I'll label them as such, that China's state grid is quietly stockpiling an additional 20% beyond their normal reserves. If that's true, the actual deficit expands to nearly 800,000 tons. Let me frame the impossible equation we're facing. We have a 600,000-ton hole in global supply. We have 145,000 tons sitting in LME warehouses. You cannot subtract 600,000 from 145,000 and expect a functioning economy on the other side. The math is telling us that price has to go to a level where demand is forcibly destroyed, where industrial users simply stop using copper because they can't afford it or can't get it. That's not speculation. That's arithmetic. And that's where the real pressure starts. Now, I know what the skeptics are going to say, because I've heard it a dozen times already this week. First objection: aluminum substitution will save us. At $12,500 per ton, engineers will just swap copper for aluminum in their designs. Problem solved. Let me pull that apart. Yes, aluminum can replace copper in some applications, but you cannot swap copper for aluminum in a power transformer or a high-performance EV motor overnight. You're talking about re-engineering entire systems, retooling factories, recertifying components for safety standards. That process takes 18 to 24 months minimum. We have a 3-day inventory problem. Do you see the disconnect? The substitution argument assumes we have time. We don't. Second objection: high prices will bring out the scrap. There's copper sitting in old buildings, old wiring, old pipes. The market will find it. Problem solved. And I want you to actually stop and think about this for a second, because the scrap narrative sounds good until you look at the reality. Yes, high prices will incentivize scrap collection. People will rip copper pipes out of abandoned buildings. They'll recycle old electronics. There will be a short-term bump in supply. But scrap is a one-time event. It's not a renewable resource. Once you've stripped the copper out of every old transformer in every condemned building, that's it. You've exhausted the pool. Scrap does not replace a mine the size of Grasberg. It doesn't replace 313,000 tons of annual production. The scrap tsunami is a temporary bandage on a severed artery. It might buy a few weeks or a few months. It doesn't solve the structural problem. And that's where the real pressure starts. Now, let me explain why this matters beyond just the copper price, because this isn't like oil, where you can just park a tanker offshore and wait for prices to rise. Copper is consumed in real time by the global economy. Every electrical grid, every EV motor, every data center, every solar installation, every wind turbine, every new building. They're all burning through copper constantly. When the buffer runs out, things don't slow down gradually. They stop. We're talking about rolling blackouts because grid operators can't replace failed transformers. We're talking about automakers idling factories because they can't get wiring harnesses. We're talking about construction projects halting because there's no copper pipe. This isn't a financial crisis. This is a physical crisis with financial consequences. And the scary part? The paper markets are still pretending everything is fine. The price on your screen is still behaving like this is a normal supply-demand imbalance that will work itself out. But I've been watching the physical premiums. I've been tracking the dealer reports. I've been monitoring the fabricator lead times. And the physical market is screaming that we're running out. There's a moment in every market dislocation where the paper price and the physical price diverge so far that the paper becomes meaningless. We saw it in nickel in 2022 when the LME had to cancel trades and halt the market entirely. We saw it in palladium when Russian supply got cut off. We're watching it happen in copper right now, in slow motion. And that's where the real pressure starts. Let me tell you what I'm actually watching, because this is where it gets practical. I have 3 specific triggers on my dashboard. Trigger 1, $6 on COMEX copper. That's the line between a rally and a mania. If copper breaks $6 and holds for 3 consecutive closes, I'm mentally shifting into parabolic mode. I'm not chasing price at that level. I've seen this movie before. When things go parabolic, the exit gets very crowded very fast. Trigger 2, LME stocks below 100,000 tons. If inventory drops under that level, I'm expecting an exchange-level event. That's the point where industrial users start panic buying and the whole system locks up. That's force majeure territory. Trigger 3. Watch for the exchanges to panic. When you see a sudden massive margin hike, 30%, 50%, even higher. That's the exchange telling you they're scared. They'll frame it as cooling the market or ensuring orderly trading. What they're really doing is trying to force out speculators and reduce the stress on the system before something breaks. And here's the big one. Watch for whispers of cash settlement. If a major institution can't deliver physical copper on a futures contract, the exchange has 2 options. Let the default become public and trigger a crisis, or force a cash settlement. Cash settlement means the contract holder gets paid in dollars instead of receiving physical metal. It's effectively a default on the physical promise. If the COMEX or LME starts forcing cash settlements on copper contracts, you'll know the game is over. The paper market will have officially decoupled from the physical market. And that's where the real pressure starts. Now, let me share what I'm personally doing with this information, because I think it's important to be transparent about that. If copper hits $13,000 on the LME, I'm taking 25% of my mining equity profits off the table. I don't want to be the last person through the exit when the music stops. I've been in this game long enough to know that you don't get a bell at the top. If the exchanges hike margins by more than 30% in a single day, I'm sitting on my hands. I do not trade in high volatility rule change environments. When the referees start making up new rules mid-game, that's when people get hurt. I'm not here to be right. I'm here to be liquid when everyone else is scrambling. And that's the difference that matters in these situations. Now, I know some of you are thinking, why should I believe this? How do I know this isn't just more hype? Fair question. Here's my answer. I've been doing this for over a decade. I've watched silver hit $49 in 2011, and then crash. I've watched copper spike and collapse. I've seen forced liquidations wipe out traders who were absolutely sure they were right. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm not pumping a specific stock. I built this channel because I have access to data that most retail investors don't see until it's too late. And I got tired of watching people get blindsided by news that was already 12 hours old. You don't have to believe me. But you should verify the data yourself. Check the LME inventory numbers. Look at the treatment charge trends. Read the Goldman and JP Morgan reports on the deficit. The information is out there. I'm just connecting the dots faster than the mainstream outlets. And here's the thing about copper that makes this situation so critical. The reason negative treatment charges matter so much is because they tell you where the bottleneck is. If the shortage was at the smelting level, if we had plenty of concentrate but not enough refining capacity, treatment charges would be going up. Smelters would be raising their fees because they'd have pricing power. But treatment charges are negative. That means the bottleneck is upstream, at the mine level. And you can't fix a mining shortage quickly. Opening a new copper mine takes 7 to 10 years from discovery to first production. Expanding an existing mine takes years. The Grasberg disaster isn't getting fixed in 2026. The supply that was supposed to come from that mine is just gone. And here's what keeps me up at night. We were already in a structural deficit before Grasberg went offline. The demand from EV production, from renewable energy infrastructure, from AI data centers, all of that was already pushing the market tight. Grasberg was the thing that broke the camel's back, but the camel was already carrying a very heavy load. So when I look at the next 6 months, I'm not asking, will we see higher prices? That seems almost inevitable given the math. The question I'm asking is, what does the system do when it actually runs out? Does COMEX force cash settlements and admit the physical market is broken? Does the LME implement delivery restrictions? Do major industrial users start signing long-term contracts at massive premiums just to secure supply? I don't know exactly how it plays out, but I know it's going to be messy, and the people who are paying attention early are the ones who don't get caught off guard. So here's what I want you to take away from this. Everyone's watching silver, and silver might do great. I'm not telling you to ignore silver. But while the crowd is focused on the shiny object, there's a crisis unfolding in the metal that actually powers the modern world. We have a mining disaster that's removed over 300,000 tons from the market. We have smelters in a death spiral, paying miners just to stay operational. We have global warehouses with 3 days of supply. And we have paper markets that are still pricing copper, like this is a normal cycle. Someone is going to be very, very wrong. The screen says $5.91. The physical reality says the price is whatever you have to pay to actually get metal delivered to your door. Don't let the paper markets blind you to what's happening in the real world. I've been in this space long enough to know that when inventory drops this low and the fundamentals are this broken, the resolution is never smooth. It's either a price spike that forces demand destruction, or it's a system-level event where the rules get rewritten overnight. Either way, the people who understand what's happening before the headlines catch up are the ones who don't get hurt. The clock is ticking. The inventory is draining. And the mainstream media is still calling this a speculative rotation. You've seen the data, you've seen the math. Now you have to decide what you do with it. Stay sharp, watch those 3 triggers. And whatever you do, don't assume the paper price is telling you the whole story. Because in about 72 hours, we're going to find out if that 3-day buffer was accurate. Or if we've been operating on borrowed time this whole week. This is the kind of moment where being early looks exactly the same as being wrong, until it doesn't.